The morning of the 15th of September, 1874, started like any other in the small settlement of Cedar Creek, Nebraska, until Martha Bennett's prize rooster, Napoleon, decided to stage what would later be known as the Great Chicken Rebellion. Martha stood in her doorway, still in her morning apron, watching in horror as her entire flock of 37 chickens scattered across the prairie like feathered tumbleweeds, having somehow orchestrated a mass escape through a hole they'd pecked in the henhouse wall during the night. "Lord have mercy," Martha exclaimed, dropping the basket of eggs she'd been carrying. The eggs splattered across the porch boards, adding insult to injury as Napoleon crowed triumphantly from atop the overturned water trough, his red crest gleaming in the morning sun like a general surveying his battlefield. Martha had been a widow for 8 months now, ever since consumption took her husband Daniel, leaving her with 60 acres of Nebraska farmland, a modest house, and these blessed chickens that were supposed to be her primary source of income. At 32, Martha was still young by frontier standards, with honey-colored hair that she kept pinned in a practical bun, and green eyes that, despite her recent grief, still held a spark of humor. She needed that humor now as she watched her best-laying hen, Clementine, waddle determinedly toward the open prairie, followed by a procession of her sisters, all seemingly drunk on their newfound freedom. The wind carried the sound of her chickens' victorious clucking across the grassland, and Martha knew she had perhaps minutes before they scattered beyond recovery. She grabbed her late husband's old work hat, jamming it over her hastily pinned hair, and set off at a run, her boots slipping in the morning dew. She managed to corner 3 hens near the garden fence, but as she lunged for them, they scattered in different directions, leaving her face first in the dirt with nothing but a handful of tail feathers. It was at this precise moment Martha spread eagle in the dirt, her dress hiked up to her knees revealing her practical wool stockings, her face smeared with mud, and her hair coming loose from its pins, that Sam Garrett came riding up the trail. Sam was what folks called a circuit cowboy, working different ranches as the seasons demanded, never staying long enough to put down roots. He'd been heading to the Johnstone Ranch to help with their fall roundup when he encountered what appeared to be a woman wrestling with the very earth itself. Sam pulled up his horse, a gentle mare named Buttercup, a name he'd never admit to in the company of other cowboys, and tipped his hat back to better assess the situation. He was a tall man, lean from years in the saddle, with sun-weathered skin and laugh lines around his blue eyes that suggested he found more humor than hardship in life. His dark hair, longer than strictly proper, curled at his collar, and he had a 3-day stubble that gave him a roguish appearance. "Ma'am," he called out, trying to keep the amusement from his voice, "are you in need of assistance, or is this some new type of farming I haven't heard about?" Martha pushed herself up, spitting out a mouthful of dirt and fixing him with a glare that could have curdled milk. "Unless you're skilled in the art of chicken wrangling, Mr. Garrett." "Sam Garrett," he supplied, dismounting with an easy grace, "and as it happens I've been known to wrangle a chicken or two in my time." "Then you'd better put those skills to use," Martha said, accepting his offered hand to help her stand. "Because right now, my entire livelihood is making a break for the Montana Territory." Sam looked out across the prairie where, indeed, dozens of chickens were spreading out like scouts from a wagon train, pecking and scratching their way to freedom. Napoleon the rooster stood on a fence post crowing what sounded suspiciously like a battle cry. Sam couldn't help it. He laughed, a rich, warm sound that rolled across the morning air. "I fail to see the humor in this situation, Mr. Garrett," Martha said stiffly, though the corner of her mouth twitched slightly, looking at the absurdity of it all. Her dignified chickens marching across the prairie like they were heading to a promised land of unlimited corn. She had to admit it was rather ridiculous. "My apologies, ma'am," Sam said, though his eyes still danced with mirth. "But I've seen cattle stampedes that were less organized than your poultry evacuation. That rooster of yours ought to be a general." "Napoleon fancies himself exactly that," Martha admitted, then caught herself. "And it's Mrs. Bennett, Martha Bennett." Sam noted the Mrs. and the black ribbon still tied around her arm. "Morning clothes." He softened his approach immediately. "Well, Mrs. Bennett, how about we round up your feathered rebels before they establish their own territory? I'll take the north side, you take the south, and we'll work them back toward the henhouse like we're herding cattle." "Chickens aren't cattle, Mr. Garrett," Martha pointed out, already moving toward the southern group. "They have minds of their own and the temperament of tiny dragons." "Then we'll have to be smarter than the dragons," Sam called back, already jogging toward a cluster of hens that had discovered a patch of grasshoppers. What followed was perhaps the most undignified hour of Sam Garrett's cowboy career. The first hen he approached, a plump Rhode Island red that Martha would later identify as Beatrice, looked at him with what could only be described as disdain, before leading him on a wild chase through a patch of prickly pear cactus. Sam emerged with his shirt torn, his hat askew, and Beatrice tucked triumphantly under his arm, pecking at his belt buckle. Meanwhile, Martha was having her own battles. She'd managed to create a makeshift corral using her apron to herd 6 hens toward the henhouse, only to have Napoleon swoop down like an avenging angel, scattering them in all directions. "You traitorous bird," she shouted at the rooster. "See if I don't turn you into Sunday dinner." Napoleon merely crowed and pranced away, his tail feathers catching the sunlight like bronze armor. Sam appeared at her elbow, now carrying 3 chickens, one under each arm and one somehow clinging to his shoulder. "Mrs. Bennett," he said with utmost seriousness, though his lips twitched, "I believe your rooster is running interference." "He's protecting his harem," Martha explained, then blushed at the improper reference. "That is, he thinks we're threats to his flock. Then we need a new strategy." Sam deposited his captured chickens in the repaired henhouse, quickly blocking the hole with a piece of board. "What does Napoleon want more than freedom?" Martha thought for a moment, then her face lit up with inspiration, corn, and competition. She hurried to the barn, returning with a bucket of corn and, surprisingly, a mirror. Napoleon cannot resist preening at his reflection. The vain creature. Sam raised an eyebrow but followed her lead as she placed the mirror against the henhouse and scattered corn in a trail leading to it. Sure enough, Napoleon spotted his reflection and strutted over, puffing his chest and displaying his plumage. While he was distracted by his own magnificence, Sam and Martha were able to work more efficiently, though not without incident. At one point they both lunged for the same hen, colliding spectacularly and landing in a tangle of limbs in the tall grass. Martha found herself nose to nose with Sam, close enough to see the gold flecks in his blue eyes and smell the leather and sage scent that clung to him. They froze for a moment, the absurdity and sudden intimacy of the situation making them both acutely aware of each other. "Your hen is escaping," Sam said softly, though neither of them moved immediately. "Let her go," Martha whispered, then seemed to catch herself. She scrambled backward, her face flaming. We'll catch her in a moment." Sam helped her up, his hand lingering perhaps a second longer than necessary on her elbow. They stood there, disheveled and dirt-covered, and then Martha started to laugh. It began as a giggle, then grew into full, unrestrained laughter that she hadn't allowed herself since Daniel's death. Sam joined in, and soon they were both doubled over, tears streaming down their faces, as they watched Clementine, the escaped hen, march primly past them with her beak in the air. "This is madness," Martha gasped between laughs. "The best kind," Sam agreed, wiping his eyes. "When was the last time you laughed like that?" Martha's laughter faded to a soft smile. "Too long," she admitted. "Far too long." They resumed their chicken chase with renewed energy, working now as a team. Sam would create distractions while Martha snuck up from behind, or Martha would use her corn bucket to lure them while Sam blocked their escape routes. They developed a system of whistles and hand signals, like seasoned partners, though they'd known each other less than 2 hours. The sun climbed higher, and both were sweating through their clothes, but there was something joyful in the work now. Sam watched Martha corner a particularly crafty hen named Prudence, noting how she moved with determination and grace despite the ridiculous nature of their task. She'd lost her hat somewhere along the way, and her honey-colored hair had come completely loose, streaming behind her as she ran. When she finally caught Prudence, she held the hen up triumphantly, grinning at Sam with such pure delight that he felt something shift in his chest. Martha, for her part, found herself stealing glances at Sam as he sweet-talked a cluster of hens, his voice low and soothing. "Now, ladies," he was saying, "this is no way for respectable hens to behave. What would your mothers think?" The hens seemed to actually listen, tilting their heads and clucking softly as he slowly herded them toward the henhouse. She noticed how gentle his hands were as he picked them up, how he was careful not to ruffle their feathers unnecessarily. By noon, they had recovered all but 5 of the chickens. These 5, led by a cunning black hen named Delilah, had taken refuge in the old oak tree at the edge of Martha's property. They sat on the branches like feathered ornaments, occasionally dropping twigs on Sam and Martha's heads when they tried to climb up. They're too high to reach safely, Martha said, shading her eyes as she looked up. And that tree's branches are too brittle to hold a person's weight past the second fork. Sam studied the situation, then had an idea. Do you have any fishing line? And maybe some dried corn? Martha fetched both, curious about his plan. Sam tied kernels of corn to several lengths of fishing line, then carefully tossed them over the branches near the chickens. The corn dangled enticingly, and one by one, the chickens began pecking at them, following the kernels as Sam slowly lowered the lines. It was ingenious, if slow, but eventually, 4 of the 5 chickens had descended. Delilah, however, remained stubbornly on her high perch, preening her feathers with infuriating nonchalance. She's always been the smartest, Martha said with a mix of pride and frustration. Too smart for her own good. Reminds me of someone I knew back in Texas, Sam mused, his eyes twinkling as he looked at Martha. Beautiful, stubborn, and too clever by half. Martha felt her cheeks warm. And what happened to this person in Texas? Sam's expression grew more serious. She married a banker who didn't appreciate what he had. Last I heard, she was miserable in a big house in Dallas, surrounded by everything except happiness. There was a story there, Martha could tell. But before she could ask, Delilah decided to make her move. The hen launched herself from the tree, not toward the ground but in a gliding leap toward the barn roof. She landed with surprising grace and immediately began exploring the roof's peak, pecking at the weather vane. Oh, for heaven's sake, Martha exclaimed. She'll be up there until Christmas if we let her. Sam was already moving toward the barn. I've got an idea, but it requires some trust. He turned to Martha with a grin. How do you feel about circus acts? Martha watched with growing alarm as Sam explained his plan. He would climb onto the barn roof from the back where the slope was gentler. But he needed Martha to climb up the ladder at the front to prevent Delilah from simply flying down that way. They would corner her between them. That's dangerous, Martha protested. The roof hasn't been repaired since, and she trailed off. Since Daniel died, she didn't say. I'll test each step, Sam promised. And you don't have to go far up the ladder, just enough to discourage our feathered escape artist. Against her better judgment, Martha found herself climbing the ladder while Sam shimmed up the back of the barn using the wood pile and rain barrel as stepping stones. She tried not to notice how his muscles moved under his shirt as he climbed, or how confidently he navigated the treacherous roof. They were nearly successful. Sam had almost reached Delilah when the hen decided she'd had enough adventure. She squawked indignantly and flew directly at Martha, who was so startled she lost her grip on the ladder. She felt herself falling backward, had a moment of pure terror, and then strong arms caught her, pulling her against a solid chest. Sam had somehow swung down from the roof in time to catch her, though the momentum sent them both tumbling into the hay pile beside the barn. They landed with Martha on top of Sam, both of them covered in hay and breathing hard. Delilah, meanwhile, had calmly walked herself into the hen house to join her sisters, apparently satisfied that she'd caused enough chaos for one day. Are you hurt? Sam asked, his voice rough with concern. His hands were on Martha's waist, steadying her. No, Martha realized she was still lying on top of him, their faces inches apart. I'm fine. You saved me. Couldn't let anything happen to you, Sam said softly. Who else would teach me the finer points of chicken psychology? Martha laughed, a breathless sound, and rolled off him, though she immediately missed his warmth. They lay side by side in the hay for a moment, looking up at the clear blue sky through the barn's open loft door. Mr. Garrett, Martha began. Sam, he corrected. After what we've been through, I think we can use first names. Sam, she repeated, liking how it sounded. Would you stay for lunch? It's the least I can offer after you spent your morning chasing my chickens. Sam turned his head to look at her, hay stuck in his dark hair, a smudge of dirt across his cheek, and smiled. Mrs. Bennett, I would be honored. Martha, she said, if we're using first names. As they picked themselves up and brushed off the hay, Martha felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. Not just for lunch, but for the conversation, the company, the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with someone who'd made her laugh until her sides ached. Martha's kitchen was modest but spotless, with blue gingham curtains and a well-scrubbed pine table. She moved efficiently, slicing bread she'd baked yesterday and laying out cold ham, pickled vegetables, and fresh butter. Sam had washed up at the pump outside, and his hair was now damp and curling more than ever. He'd removed his torn shirt, wearing just his undershirt, and Martha tried not to notice how it clung to his broad shoulders. "Can I help?" Sam asked, standing uncertainly in the doorway. "You can tell me what you're really doing in Cedar Creek," Martha said, surprising herself with her directness. "Men like you don't usually stop for small ranch work." Sam sat at the table, his expression thoughtful. "You're right. I was heading to the Johnstone place, but—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've been drifting for 3 years, Martha. Ever since I came back from the war to find my family's ranch sold for taxes and my fiancé married to another man. I thought if I kept moving, I'd find whatever it was I lost." Martha set the food on the table and sat across from him. "And have you? Found it?" "No," Sam admitted. "But this morning, chasing those chickens with you, laughing like I haven't in years. It made me realize maybe I've been looking for the wrong thing. Maybe instead of trying to find what I lost, I should be open to finding something new." The weight of his words settled between them. Martha understood loss, understood the temptation to close oneself off rather than risk being hurt again. "Daniel died 8 months ago," she said quietly. "Consumption. He was a good man, steady and reliable. We had a quiet life together." "You loved him," Sam said. "It wasn't a question." "I did," Martha confirmed. "But—" She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I loved him the way you love a warm hearth in winter. Comfortable, safe, necessary. We never—" She gestured vaguely at the chaos outside. "We never chased chickens together." Sam smiled softly. "No? Daniel would have built a better fence," Martha said, a smile playing at her lips. "He was practical that way. He wouldn't have seen the humor in Napoleon's rebellion or Delilah's acrobatics. He would have seen problems to be solved efficiently." "Nothing wrong with efficiency," Sam said diplomatically. "No," Martha agreed. "But sometimes inefficiency leads to better stories." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in thought. Finally, Sam spoke. "The Johnstone ranch job would keep me in the area for at least a month, maybe 2. Would you? That is, would you mind if I called on you? Properly, I mean. Not just for chicken emergencies." Martha's heart fluttered like one of her escaped hens. "That would depend," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "On what? On whether you're calling as Sam the drifting cowboy, or Sam the man who might consider staying in one place for a while." Sam reached across the table and gently took her hand. His palm was calloused but warm, and Martha felt the touch all the way to her toes. "What if I'm Sam the man who's tired of drifting? Sam the man who thinks he might have found a reason to stay?" Before Martha could respond, a tremendous crash came from outside, followed by familiar squawking. They rushed to the window to see that Napoleon had somehow gotten out again and was now chasing the neighbor's dog around the yard, wings spread and neck extended like a feathered fury. "That bird is a menace," Martha said, but she was laughing. "Never a dull moment with Napoleon around," Sam agreed, already heading for the door. "Shall we?" The next few weeks fell into an unexpected pattern. Sam would arrive at Martha's farm each morning before heading to the Johnstone ranch, helping her with repairs that had been neglected since Daniel's death. The chicken coop was reinforced, though Napoleon still managed to find ways to cause chaos. The barn roof patched, and the fence lines mended. In return, Martha packed him lunches and mended his clothes, their easy companionship growing stronger with each passing day. The townspeople began to notice, of course. Mrs. Abigail Morrison, the self-appointed moral guardian of Cedar Creek, made it her business to inform Martha that it was highly improper for a widow still in mourning to be entertaining a male visitor so frequently. "He's helping with the farm work, Abigail," Martha said patiently, though her jaw was clenched. They were in the general store, and half the town seemed to be listening while pretending to shop. "Help with farm work doesn't require him to stay for supper 3 nights a week," Abigail sniffed. "You're right," Martha said, her patience snapping. "It doesn't require it. I invite him because I enjoy his company, because he makes me laugh, because for the first time in months, I don't dread waking up to face another day alone." The store went silent. Martha could feel the heat in her cheeks, but she stood tall, meeting Abigail's shocked gaze steadily. It was old Mr. Henderson, the blacksmith, who broke the silence. "Seems to me," he said in his gravelly voice, "that Daniel Bennett would want his wife to be happy. Man like that, who loved his wife as Daniel did, wouldn't want her grieving forever. Besides," added Mrs. Chen, the baker's wife, "that Sam Garrett helped me catch my runaway pig last week. Didn't ask for nothing in return. Good man, far as I can tell." The support was unexpected but welcome. Martha left the store with her head high, though her hands shook slightly as she loaded her purchases into the wagon. Sam was waiting by the wagon, having witnessed the entire exchange through the store window. "You didn't have to defend me," he said softly. "I wasn't defending you," Martha replied. "I was defending us. Whatever, us island." Sam helped her up onto the wagon seat, then surprised her by climbing up beside her instead of mounting his horse. "I know what I'd like us to be," he said, taking the reins from her hands, "but I'm willing to wait until you're ready to hear it." They rode in silence for a while, the late afternoon sun painting the prairie gold. Finally, Martha spoke. "The town harvest dance is in 2 weeks. I heard," Sam said carefully. "I haven't been to a dance since Daniel died." "Understandable." Martha took a breath. "Would you escort me?" Sam turned to look at her, his eyes bright with surprise and joy. "Martha Bennett, are you asking me to a dance?" "I believe I am," she said, her heart racing. "Though I should warn you, I haven't danced in almost a year. I might step on your feet." "I'll risk it," Sam said, grinning. "Besides, after chasing chickens with you, dancing should be easy." As if in response to his words, Napoleon appeared in the road ahead of them, having somehow escaped yet again. The rooster stood defiantly in their path, Crow challenging the approaching wagon. "How does he keep getting out?" Sam wondered. "I've given up trying to understand," Martha laughed. "I think he's part magician." Sam stopped the wagon and jumped down, approaching Napoleon with exaggerated caution. "Now, General," he said seriously, "you're undermining your own troops' morale with these constant escapes." Napoleon tilted his head, considering, then strutted to the side of the road with great dignity, allowing them to pass. Sam climbed back up, shaking his head. "I swear that bird understands every word." "He likes you," Martha observed. "He never moves for anyone else." "Must be my natural charm," Sam said with a wink that made Martha's stomach flutter. The night of the harvest dance arrived crisp and clear, with stars scattered across the sky like spilled sugar. Sam arrived at Martha's door wearing his best shirt, one she had mended and pressed, and carrying a small bouquet of prairie wildflowers. Martha had agonized over what to wear, finally choosing a deep green dress that brought out her eyes. She'd left off the mourning band for the first time. "You look beautiful," Sam said simply, his eyes warm with admiration. "You clean up well yourself," Martha replied, though well was an understatement. He was devastatingly handsome, and she had to remind herself to breathe normally. The dance was held in Henderson's barn, cleared out and decorated with cornstalks and paper lanterns. When they entered together, Martha felt the weight of every stare, heard the whispers ripple through the crowd. But then Sam's hand was on her lower back, warm and reassuring, and she found she didn't care what anyone thought. The first dance was a reel, fast and lively. Martha was rusty at first, but Sam was a strong lead, guiding her through the steps with the same patient confidence he'd shown during their chicken chase. Soon she was laughing, her skirts swirling, all self-consciousness forgotten. They danced 3 dances in a row before begging off for punch and fresh air. Outside, the night was cool and quiet after the noise of the barn. They walked toward the little creek that ran behind the property, their hands almost but not quite touching. "Thank you," Martha said softly. "For what?" "For making me brave enough to do this. To choose happiness instead of hiding behind my grief." Sam stopped walking and turned to face her. "Martha, you're the bravest person I know. You were managing that farm alone, facing each day with determination. All I did was chase some chickens." "You did more than that," Martha said, stepping closer. "You reminded me that life can be joyful, even after loss. You made me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how." Sam cupped her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you, Martha?" Instead of answering, Martha rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was sweet and tentative at first, then deeper as Sam's arms came around her, pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I love you," Sam said, the words tumbling out as if they couldn't be contained. "I know it's too soon, and you might not be ready to hear it, but I need you to know. I love your strength, your humor, the way you talk to your chickens like they're people. I love how you attack problems head-on, even when they're ridiculous. I love—" Martha silenced him with another kiss. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "Lord, help me. I do." They might have stayed there forever, lost in each other, but a familiar squawking interrupted them. Napoleon had somehow followed them to the dance and was now attempting to join the festivities, much to the dismay of the musicians inside. "How did he get here?" Sam asked incredulously. "It's 3 miles from your farm." "I've given up being surprised," Martha laughed, but she was already moving toward the barn. "We'd better catch him before he causes a scandal." What followed was perhaps even more chaotic than the original chicken chase. Napoleon, apparently offended at not being invited to the dance, proceeded to chase the fiddler around the barn, sending dancers scattering. He knocked over the punch bowl, sent Mrs. Morrison into hysterics, and finally perched on the rafters, crowing along with the music. Sam and Martha worked together, using the same signals and teamwork they'd developed weeks ago. Sam distracted Napoleon with a mirror he borrowed from Mrs. Chen while Martha climbed a ladder with a handful of corn. The entire population of Cedar Creek watched as their prim widow and the handsome cowboy coordinated a precision capture that would have made a military general proud. When Martha finally descended the ladder with Napoleon tucked under her arm, the barn erupted in applause. Even Mrs. Morrison was clapping, though she tried to hide it behind her fan. "Folks," Sam said, still breathless from the chase, "I have an announcement." He took Martha's free hand, the other still holding Napoleon, and faced the crowd. "I've asked Martha Bennett to marry me, and she said yes." There was a moment of stunned silence. Martha herself looked shocked. This wasn't how Sam had proposed in her imagination. But then she saw his eyes, nervous but hopeful, and realized he was giving her an out. She could deny it, say he was joking, preserve her reputation. Instead, she handed Napoleon to a surprised Mr. Henderson and took both of Sam's hands. "It's true," she said clearly. "We're getting married." The barn erupted again, this time with a mixture of congratulations and gossip. But the warmth of the well-wishes far outweighed the disapproval. Even Mrs. Morrison managed a tight smile and a muttered, "About time someone took that rooster in hand." Later, as Sam drove Martha home with Napoleon secured in a crate in the back, Martha said, "That wasn't actually a proposal, you know, wasn't it?" Sam asked innocently. "A proper proposal involves asking, not announcing." Sam pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the moonlit road. He jumped down and came around to Martha's side, then dropped to one knee in the dirt. "Martha Bennett, you magnificent, chicken-chasing, dance-stealing, heart-capturing woman, will you marry me? Will you let me wake up every morning knowing I get to face whatever chaos Napoleon creates with you by my side? Will you build a life with me that's equal parts hard work and laughter?" Martha looked down at him, this wonderful man who'd literally caught her when she fell, who'd turned her grief into joy, who treated her stubborn chickens with the same gentle respect he showed her. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course, yes." Sam stood and kissed her, right there in the middle of the road, with Napoleon squawking his approval from his crate and the stars bearing witness overhead. They were married 6 weeks later, on a crisp November morning with the whole town in attendance. Napoleon served as an unofficial ring-bearer, though he had to be bribed with corn to walk down the aisle instead of attacking the minister's shiny shoes. The Johnstone family gave Sam a permanent position as foreman, with a house on their property, but Sam politely declined. He'd already found his home at Martha's farm, which would now be their farm. As winter settled over Nebraska, the newlyweds worked side by side, preparing for the cold months ahead. Sam built a new, supposedly escape-proof coop. Napoleon escaped within 3 days, while Martha taught him her grandmother's recipes and the intricate politics of small-town society. They hosted Sunday dinners, helped neighbors with their harvests, and slowly became one of the most beloved couples in Cedar Creek. The chickens, for their part, seemed to accept Sam as their new co-guardian. Even Delilah, the clever black hen, would perch on his shoulder while he worked, though she still refused to lay eggs in the nesting boxes, preferring increasingly creative hiding spots that turned egg gathering into a daily treasure hunt. One evening, as snow began to fall, Sam and Martha sat by their fire, Napoleon inexplicably inside and dozing by the hearth. They'd long since given up trying to keep him in the coop at night. Martha was knitting tiny socks, a secret she hadn't shared yet, while Sam read aloud from a book of poetry, his voice warm and deep in the quiet room. "Sam," Martha said suddenly, "do you ever regret it? Giving up your wandering life for a small farm and a flock of demented chickens?" Sam set down the book and pulled her into his lap, knitting and all. "Martha, my love, I spent 3 years looking for home in all the wrong places. Turns out home wasn't a place at all. It was you, standing in the dirt with chicken feathers in your hair, glaring at me like I was the cause of all your troubles. You were, Martha said, but she was smiling. You disrupted my perfectly miserable existence. And you disrupted mine, Sam countered, kissing her temple. Thank God for Napoleon and his great rebellion. As if understanding he was being discussed, Napoleon opened one eye, gave a soft crow, and went back to sleep. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers and, to no one's surprise, another chicken escape. This time, however, it was the new chicks that had hatched over winter, following their parents in what appeared to be a hereditary predisposition to freedom. Sam and Martha stood on their porch, coffee in hand, watching the tiny balls of fluff scatter across the yard while Napoleon directed operations from his favorite fence post. Should we chase them? Martha asked, though she was already smiling. In a minute, Sam said, pulling her close. Let them have their adventure first. They stood together, watching the sunrise paint their land gold, their chickens staging minor rebellions, their life perfectly imperfect. Martha placed Sam's hand on her growing belly, where their child grew, and felt his intake of breath as he understood. Really? He whispered. Really? She confirmed. Due in autumn? Just in time for the harvest dance. Sam whooped and spun her around, causing the chickens to scatter even further and Napoleon to crow in alarm. They were laughing, crying, kissing, all at once, while their neighbors passing on the road shook their heads and smiled at the crazy chicken farmers who'd found love in the most unexpected way. That afternoon, as they worked together to corral the escaped chicks, a much easier task than their parents had been, though no less amusing, old Mr. Word Henderson stopped by with a gift, a wooden sign he'd carved that read Garrett Farm, home of Napoleon's empire. Figured you might as well make it official, he said with a grin. That rooster's more famous than the mayor these days. It was true. Napoleon had become something of a local legend, with people traveling from neighboring towns to see the escape artist Rooster and his loyal flock. Martha had started selling Napoleon's eggs at a premium, marketing them as eggs from free-thinking chickens, and they sold faster than she could gather them. As summer progressed, Martha grew round with pregnancy, and Sam became increasingly protective, trying to prevent her from climbing ladders after Delilah or chasing Napoleon when he inevitably escaped. Martha largely ignored his protests, though she did allow him to do the more strenuous work. One hot July day, when Martha was teaching Sam how to can preserves, a skill he approached with the same determination he'd once used for breaking horses, Napoleon achieved his greatest escape yet. He somehow led the entire flock, including the half-grown chicks, on a parade through the center of town during the Founding Day celebration. Sam and Martha arrived just in time to see Napoleon strutting down Main Street, leading his feathered army past the reviewing stand where the mayor was mid-speech. The crowd, instead of being annoyed, burst into delighted laughter and applause. Children ran alongside the chicken parade, and someone started playing a fife, turning the whole thing into an impromptu celebration. Should we stop them? Sam asked, though he was clearly fighting laughter. Martha, one hand on her swollen belly, shook her head. Look at everyone's faces. When was the last time this town had this much joy at a founding day? The mayor, a good-natured man named Thomas Brightwater, actually incorporated Napoleon into his speech, and just as our town founders showed independence and determination, he announced, so too does our famous Napoleon remind us that freedom is worth celebrating, even if it comes in feathered form. Sam and Martha worked their way through the crowd, not to capture the chickens but to follow them, making sure they didn't cause any real damage. The chickens, seeming to sense they were the stars of the show, behaved remarkably well, pecking at dropped popcorn and allowing children to pet them gently. It was Mrs. Morrison who surprised everyone the most. The stern woman, who had been Martha's harshest critic, suddenly laughed as Delilah perched on her hat. Well, she announced loudly, I suppose if we're going to be known for something, it might as well be for having the most entertaining chickens in Nebraska. That moment marked a turning point. The town fully embraced Sam and Martha, and their unconventional farming methods became a source of pride rather than gossip. People would bring visitors to see Napoleon perform his escapes, which Sam had secretly begun staging once a week, though Napoleon needed no encouragement to add his own creative flourishes. September arrived with golden light and cool breezes, and Martha's time grew near. Sam had become almost comically overprotective, following her around with chairs in case she needed to sit, trying to prevent her from doing anything more strenuous than breathing. Martha bore it with amused patience until the day she went into labor. It started, naturally, during another chicken chase. Napoleon had decided to lead a raid on Mrs. Chen's bakery, and Martha had been in the middle of negotiating a peace treaty involving 2 loaves of day-old bread when her water broke. Sam, who had been attempting to extract clementine from a flour barrel, turned white as the flour now covering the hen. "Now?" he asked, his voice climbing an octave. "Babies don't wait for convenient times," Martha said through gritted teeth as another contraction hit. "Though I should have expected our child would choose the most chaotic possible moment." The ride to fetch the midwife was one Sam would never forget. He left Martha with Mrs. Chen, who had had 8 children and remained admirably calm, while he rode like the wind. When he returned with Mrs. Foster, the midwife, he found the entire chicken flock had somehow congregated in Mrs. Chen's garden, with Napoleon perched on the windowsill as if standing guard. "Even the chickens know," Mrs. Chen said with a smile. "They're waiting for the new little farmer." The labor was long but uncomplicated. Sam stayed by Martha's side throughout, letting her squeeze his hand until he thought the bones might break, whispering encouragements and terrible jokes to make her laugh between contractions. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, their daughter was born, healthy, loud, and with a shock of dark hair like her father's. "What should we name her?" Sam asked, cradling the tiny bundle with infinite tenderness. Martha looked out the window where Napoleon still kept his vigil, then at her husband and daughter. "Joy," she said softly. "Joy, Margaret Garrett. Because that's what she is. Pure joy born from laughter and love, and the most ridiculous chicken chase in history." Sam kissed his wife, then his daughter. "Joy at Island." As if in approval, Napoleon crowed, not his usual challenging battle cry, but something softer, almost like a lullaby. The other chickens settled for the night, and peace descended on Cedar Creek. 5 years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. Joy grew into a spirited child who could charm chickens as easily as her parents, though she had a special bond with Napoleon, who had appointed himself her personal guardian. The old rooster, now getting on in years, would follow her around the farm, pecking at anyone he deemed a threat, which included grasshoppers, butterflies, and occasionally Sam's boots. The farm prospered. What had started as a joke, Napoleon's empire, became a thriving business. People came from all over to buy eggs, see the famous chickens, and hear the story of how a widow and a cowboy fell in love while chasing escaped poultry. Martha wrote a children's book about Napoleon's adventures, which sold well enough to allow them to expand the farm and help other struggling neighbors. Sam never lost his wanderlust entirely, but now it expressed itself in family adventures, taking Joy to see the ocean, visiting the mountains, always returning home to their farm and their chickens. He became known as one of the best horsemen in the county and trained horses for extra income, but his heart remained with Martha, Joy, and their feathered empire. On a spring morning exactly 6 years after that first great chicken chase, Sam and Martha stood once again by the hen house watching their chickens, now numbering over 100, peacefully pecking in the yard. Joy played nearby, trying to teach the newest batch of chicks to march in formation, with limited success. "No escapes today?" Sam asked, wrapping his arms around Martha from behind. "Don't jinx it," Martha warned, but she was smiling. "Besides, I think Napoleon is finally slowing down. He's almost 8 years old now, ancient for a rooster." As if to prove her wrong, Napoleon suddenly let out a mighty crow and took off at a run, the entire flock following him. But this time, instead of heading for the open prairie, they ran in a large circle around Sam and Martha, creating a whirlwind of feathers and squawks before settling back down exactly where they'd started. Did he just? Sam stuttered. "I think Napoleon just performed his first choreographed show." Martha laughed. "He's becoming a theater rooster in his old age." Joy ran over, her dark braids flying. "Mama, Papa, did you see? Napoleon did the circle dance I've been teaching him." Sam scooped up his daughter, marveling at how she'd inherited Martha's green eyes and his adventurous spirit. "You taught Napoleon to dance? He's a very smart rooster," Joy said seriously. "He just needed someone to believe in his artistic side." Martha and Sam exchanged glances over their daughter's head, both thinking the same thing. Their life had turned out nothing like they'd planned, and everything like it was meant to be. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, with Joy playing her own small fiddle, a gift from Sam, and Napoleon dozed at their feet like a faithful dog, Martha leaned into her husband's shoulder. "Do you remember?" she said softly. That first day, when you asked if I needed assistance. How could I forget? Sam replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. You were magnificent, covered in mud, mad as a wet hen, absolutely beautiful. I thought you were just another drifting cowboy who'd be gone by sunset, Martha admitted. I thought I was too, Sam said. Good thing Napoleon had other plans. The old rooster opened one eye, gave a soft, satisfied crow, and went back to sleep. In the hen house, the chickens settled for the night, clucking contentedly. Tomorrow there would undoubtedly be new escapes, new chases, new chaos to manage. But tonight, the Garrett family sat in perfect contentment, their love story begun with scattered chickens and sealed with laughter echoing across the Nebraska prairie. The last rays of sun painted the fence posts gold, and somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew, carrying passengers to new destinations and new adventures. But Sam Garrett no longer heard the call of distant places. He'd found his adventure right here, in a woman who could make him laugh, a daughter who could teach chickens to dance, and a rooster who had orchestrated the greatest love story Cedar Creek had ever seen. As Martha often said when telling their story to visitors, sometimes love comes riding up on a fine horse with flowers and promises. But sometimes, just sometimes, it arrives covered in feathers, causing chaos, and teaching you that the best things in life are worth chasing, even if they're just chickens. And Napoleon, now immortalized in story and song, would crow his agreement, reminding everyone that the greatest rebellions sometimes lead to the happiest endings, and that love, like chickens, cannot truly be contained by any fence, no matter how well built. The end.